stood in the bridal boutique, holding my wedding dress against my chest, phone pressed to my ear. Mom, the wedding's in 3 weeks. Can you at least confirm you're coming? Silence stretched between us like a canyon. Then her voice came through, flat and distracted. Adrian, your brother's promotion party is that same weekend. We already committed. My stomach twisted into knots. I gripped the dress tighter, feeling the delicate fabric crumple in my shaking hands. But Mom, I sent the invitation 6 months ago. Brandon's party can't be. She cut me off sharply. He's made partner at the firm. This is important for the family. The boutique assistant looked away, pretending not to notice my tears. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. And my wedding isn't important. Mom sighed like I was being dramatic. We'll try to stop by if there's time. I have to go now. The line went dead. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, wedding dress hanging limp in my arms, mascara beginning to smear. The assistant touched my shoulder gently. Are you okay? I nodded, lying. I wasn't okay. I hadn't been okay for years. Growing up, I learned early that Brandon was the sun and I was just a distant moon. He played football while I painted in my room. He brought home trophies while I brought home report cards full of A's that nobody really looked at. Mom and Dad cheered at every single one of his games, cameras flashing, voices hoarse from screaming his name. When I had my art exhibition in 10th grade, they showed up 20 minutes before it ended, stayed for 5 minutes, then left for Brandon's playoff game. I remembered standing next to my best watercolor piece, a landscape I'd spent months perfecting, watching them walk out. My art teacher squeezed my hand. Your work is beautiful, Adrian, she whispered. But it didn't matter. Beauty meant nothing without witnesses. Brandon became a lawyer just like Dad wanted. I became a freelance graphic designer, which Dad called playing on computers. At family dinners, they asked Brandon about cases and clients. They asked me when I'd get a real job. I stopped expecting anything different. When I met Marcus, a kind man who really saw me, I thought maybe this would change things. Maybe my wedding would finally make them proud. Marcus proposed on a quiet beach at sunset, just the two of us and the sound of waves. He knelt in the sand, ring box open, eyes full of love. Adrian, you're the most genuine person I've ever met. Marry me. I said yes through happy tears, my heart feeling full for the first time in years. We planned a small wedding, nothing extravagant, just intimate and meaningful. 50 guests, a garden venue, handmade decorations. I poured my heart into every detail, designing our invitations myself, choosing flowers that meant something, writing vows that made Marcus cry when I read them aloud during our rehearsal. I mailed my parents their invitation in a hand-painted envelope. I called them twice to make sure they received it. Mom said, "Yes, it's lovely, dear," in that absent voice she used when scrolling through her phone. I marked their names on the guest list with a gold pen, reservation confirmed. Then, 3 weeks before the wedding, Brandon announced his promotion party. Same weekend, same city, different priority. Mom called it unfortunate timing. Dad called it just how things worked out. I called it exactly what it was. A choice. They chose him again like they always did. The morning of my wedding arrived wrapped in golden sunshine. I woke up in a hotel room surrounded by my bridesmaids, college friends who'd become my chosen family. They helped me into my dress, fixed my hair, told me I looked beautiful. My best friend, Carmen, held my hand as I stared at my phone, hoping for a message. Maybe they'll surprise you, she said softly. I nodded, not believing it. The ceremony took place in a garden filled with white roses and soft music. Marcus waited at the altar, looking at me like I was made of starlight. I walked down the aisle alone, no father to give me away, no mother crying in the front row. Their seats sat empty, 2 glaring vacuums in an otherwise perfect day. I felt the absence like a physical weight on my chest. But when I reached Marcus and he took my hands, whispering, "You're breathtaking," some of that weight lifted. We exchanged vows. Kissed. Everyone cheered. It was beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. At the reception, I kept glancing at the door, some pathetic part of me still hoping they'd show up. They never did. That night, after the last guest left and Marcus fell asleep beside me, I lay awake scrolling through my phone. Brandon had posted dozens of photos from his promotion party. My parents were in every single one, dressed up, smiling wide, champagne glasses raised high. Mom wore the dress she'd said was too fancy for events. Dad wore his best suit, the one he claimed was getting too tight. They looked happy, celebratory, present. I zoomed in on one photo, studying Mom's face. She was laughing, head thrown back, pure joy radiating from her. I couldn't remember the last time she looked at me like that. I scrolled through the comments. Congratulations poured in. Family goals, someone wrote. So proud, wrote another. My chest felt hollow. I opened my own wedding photos. They were beautiful. Carmen had captured everything perfectly. But when I looked at the ceremony shots, all I saw were those 2 empty seats. I set my phone down, staring at the ceiling, tears sliding sideways into my hair. Marcus stirred, pulling me close. You okay? He mumbled. I whispered, yes, and added another lie to the collection I'd been building my entire life. The next morning I texted Mom a simple message. We missed you yesterday. 3 hours later she responded. Brandon's party was wonderful. Sorry we couldn't make it. Send pictures. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just a breezy dismissal and a request for photos, like they'd missed a casual brunch instead of my wedding. I showed Marcus the text. He read it, jaw tightening. That's unacceptable, Adrian. I shrugged, a gesture I'd perfected over 28 years. It's just how they are. He shook his head. No, it's how they choose to be. There's a difference. His words planted something in my mind, a tiny seed of anger I'd been suppressing for years. That week I threw myself into work. A tech startup had approached me months earlier about a full-time position, lead designer with equity options. I turned them down, comfortable with freelancing. Now I called them back. Is that position still available? The founder, a woman named Victoria, laughed with delight. Adrian, yes. When can you start? I started the following Monday. Something had shifted in me. I was done being invisible. The tech company, NextGen Solutions, was developing an app that would revolutionize digital payments. My job was to design the entire user interface. I worked 12-hour days, pouring every ounce of creativity and frustration into the project. Victoria noticed immediately. You're incredible, she said during our second week. This is exactly the vision we needed. The equity package they'd offered was generous. 2% of the company. At the time, that seemed like monopoly money, theoretical wealth that might never materialize. I signed the papers without much thought. Marcus supported everything. He worked as a teacher, steady and reliable, and he never made me feel guilty for my long hours. Build something amazing, he'd say, kissing my forehead as I left for the office each morning. I dove deeper into the work. The app's design became sleek and intuitive, something beautiful and functional. Beta testing showed incredible promise. Within 6 months we launched publicly. Within 8 months we had 5 million users. Within a year, major investors came knocking. My 2% suddenly represented real money. By year 2, NextGen was valued at $180 million. My share was worth $3.6 million. I stared at the valuation report, hands trembling. This was real. This was mine. I told Marcus first. We were sitting in our small apartment, eating takeout on the couch, when I showed him the numbers. He dropped his fork. Adrian, are you serious? I nodded, still processing it myself. The company's going public next quarter. After that, I can actually sell some shares. He pulled me into his arms, laughing in disbelief. You did this. You built this. For the first time in my life, I felt genuinely proud of myself. Not because someone else validated me, but because I could see my own worth reflected in something tangible. I didn't tell my parents. Not yet. Part of me wanted to see how long it would take them to ask about my life. Weeks passed. Mom called once, talking about Brandon's new house for 20 minutes before asking, "How's the computer stuff going?" I said, "Fine," and left it at that. She didn't press for details. She never did. The company went public 4 months later. The stock price soared. My shares were suddenly worth $8 million. I sold a portion, enough to pay off our apartment, buy a car, and invest the rest. The car I chose was a Porsche 911, guards red, exactly $135,000. Marcus questioned it. "That's a lot of money for a car." I looked at him steadily. "I want it." He understood. It wasn't about the car. It was about claiming something for myself, something visible and undeniable. The day I picked up the Porsche, I sat in the driver's seat, hands on the leather steering wheel, breathing in that new car smell. The salesman smiled. "Beauty, isn't she?" He nodded. She was beautiful. But more than that, she was mine. I drove home slowly, feeling the engine's power, the smooth handling, the way people's heads turned as I passed. For 28 years, I'd been invisible. Not anymore. Marcus took a photo of me leaning against the hood. Sun setting behind me, genuine smile on my face. "Post it," he urged. I hesitated, then uploaded it to social media with a simple caption. "Earned it." Comments flooded in from friends, congratulations and excitement. Then, buried in the notifications, I saw Mom had commented, "Nice car. Borrowed." My smile faded. Even when confronted with evidence of my success, she assumed it wasn't really mine. I deleted her comment and turned off my phone. That weekend, Marcus and I drove to the coast, top down, music loud. For 2 days, I didn't think about my parents or Brandon or empty chairs at my wedding. I just existed, happy and free. 3 months later, I got a text from Brandon. It was the first time he'd contacted me directly in over a year. "Hey sis, Mom mentioned you got a new car? Congrats." I stared at the message, analyzing every word. Not "I heard you're doing well" or "how's married life?" Just a surface-level acknowledgement of a material possession. I responded simply, "Thanks." He didn't reply. A week later, Mom called. "Adrian, we're having a family dinner next month. Your father's birthday. You should come." Something in her tone felt off. Too casual. Too planned. "Will Brandon be there?" asked. "Of course. The whole family." Pause. "Okay. I'll check with Marcus." She hung up quickly, like she had somewhere more important to be. Marcus and I discussed it that night. "Do you want to go?" he asked carefully. Thought about it. Part of me wanted to skip it entirely, to keep living my new life without their judgment. But another part, the part that still remembered being a little girl desperate for Dad's attention, wanted them to see me. Really see me. "Yes," I decided. "Let's go." We marked it on the calendar. I had 1 month to prepare myself emotionally. The dinner was at my parents' house, the same suburban home where I'd grown up feeling like a guest. I pulled up in the Porsche, Marcus beside me, my stomach churning with anxiety. Before I could even turn off the engine, I saw curtains move in the front window. Someone was watching. We walked to the door, my heels clicking on the pavement. I dressed carefully, elegant but understated, wanting to look successful without seeming like I was trying too hard. It was an exhausting balance. Mom opened the door, her eyes immediately dropping to my outfit, then flicking past me to the car parked in their driveway. Her expression shifted, something between surprise and confusion. "Adrian, we're here. And you drove that." I smiled tightly. "Hi, Mom." "Yes, that's my car." She stepped aside, letting us in. Dad was in the living room, Brandon beside him, both watching a football game. They barely looked up when we entered. "Hey," Brandon said, eyes still on the screen. Dad grunted something that might have been a greeting. Marcus squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. This was going to be a long night. Dinner was tense from the start. Mom had made Dad's favorite meal, of course, and the table was set beautifully. We sat down, and for the first few minutes, conversation centered on Dad's birthday, Brandon's latest case, and Mom's garden. Nobody asked about me. Finally, Brandon turned to me, casual curiosity on his face. "So that Porsche outside, that's really yours?" He nodded. "Yes." He laughed. "Must be a lease, right? Those things are expensive." I set down my fork carefully. "I bought it. Paid in full." The table went quiet. Dad looked at me for the first time all evening. "With what money? Did Marcus get a promotion?" Marcus stiffened beside me, but I touched his knee, silently asking him to let me handle this. "No," I said evenly. "I bought it with my own money. From my job." Mom tilted her head, that patronizing expression I knew so well. "Adrian, those cars cost over $100,000. Your freelance work doesn't." I interrupted her, something I'd never done before. "I'm not freelancing anymore. I work for a tech company. Have equity. The company went public. I did well." Silence blanketed the room like snow. Brandon recovered first. "Wait, how well are we talking?" I met his eyes. "Well enough to buy a Porsche in cash and not worry about it." Dad's fork clattered against his plate. "You're saying you make that kind of money? Doing what exactly?" For the first time in my life, I had their complete attention. Every eye at the table was locked on me. Felt strange, uncomfortable, but also powerful. I explained my job, the app, the equity, the public offering. I kept my tone matter of fact, not boasting, just stating facts. As I spoke, I watched their faces change. Confusion became surprise. Surprise became something that looked almost like respect. When I finished, nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Mom said quietly, "Why didn't you tell us?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. I could have said many things. I could have reminded her that she never asked. I could have pointed out that she'd assumed my wedding gift was borrowed money, that she'd dismissed my career for years, that she'd skipped my wedding for Brandon's party. Instead, I just said, "I didn't think you'd be interested." The rest of dinner was strange. Suddenly, my parents asked questions. What exactly did I do? How did the company work? What were my responsibilities? I answered each one, watching them process this new version of me. A version that didn't fit the narrative they'd constructed. Brandon was quiet, unusually so. He pushed food around his plate, jaw tight. Dad kept glancing at Marcus, like he was trying to figure out how this had happened under his nose. After dinner, Mom pulled me aside while everyone else was in the living room. "Adrian, we're very proud of you." Her words felt hollow, recited. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never noticed before. Underneath the perfect makeup and styled hair, she looked uncomfortable, like she'd been caught doing something wrong. "Thanks, Mom," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She touched my arm. "About the wedding. I know we should have." I pulled away gently. "It's in the past." She nodded quickly, relief washing over her face. She didn't want to talk about it any more than I did. We rejoined the others. The evening ended awkwardly, everyone saying goodbye with forced smiles. In the car, Marcus let out a long breath. "That was intense." I nodded, gripping the steering wheel. My hands were shaking slightly. They looked at me like I was a stranger. He turned to face me. "Because they don't know you. They never bothered to." His words hit hard because they were true. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn their attention, and the moment I stopped trying, the moment I built something for myself, suddenly they noticed. But it felt wrong. Hello. I didn't want them to love me because I had money. I wanted them to love me because I was their daughter. We drove in silence for a while. Then Marcus said softly, "You know you don't owe them anything, right?" I did know that. Intellectually, I understood it completely. But emotionally, I was still that little girl standing next to her watercolor painting, hoping her parents would stay. Over the next week, something shifted. Mom started texting me regularly. "How's work? Thinking of you. Let's have lunch soon." Dad called twice, which was twice more than he'd called in the previous year. Brandon sent a long message about how we should reconnect as adults. I read each message with a mixture of sadness and anger. Where was this effort before? I didn't respond immediately to any of them. Instead, I focused on my life. Work was thriving. Marcus and I were looking at houses, real houses with yards and extra bedrooms. My bank account had numbers in it that still didn't feel real. One afternoon, Victoria called me into her office. "Adrian, we're expanding. I want you to head the entire design department. It comes with a significant raise and more equity." I accepted without hesitation. That evening I told Marcus, and we celebrated with champagne on our tiny apartment balcony. "You've come so far," he said, pride shining in his eyes. I thought about where I'd been 2 years ago, standing in a bridal boutique, dress crumpled in my arms, tears streaming down my face. It felt so small then, so worthless. Now I felt like I was finally becoming the person I was always meant to be. My phone buzzed. Another text from Mom. "Would love to see your new office sometime. So proud of my successful daughter." I stared at the message, and something inside me finally broke. Not in a painful way, but like a dam releasing pressure. I was done pretending this was normal. I was done accepting crumbs. Called Mom back immediately. She answered on the second ring, voice bright. "Adrian, I was hoping you'd call. I didn't waste time with pleasantries." "Mom, why are you suddenly so interested in my life?" Silence. Then carefully. "What do you mean?" Pressed on. "For 28 years, you barely acknowledged my existence. You missed my wedding for Brandon's party. You called my career, playing on computers. Now I have money and suddenly you're texting me every day. Why?" Her voice turned defensive. "That's not fair, Adrian. We've always cared about you." I laughed and it came out bitter. "You didn't come to my wedding, Mom. You didn't even try." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "We made a mistake, okay? We should have been there." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever gotten from her. But it felt too little, too late. "Do you even remember what date my wedding was?" Yes. Another pause. "It was in the summer, wasn't it?" My heart sank. She didn't remember. She genuinely didn't remember what should have been one of the most important days of my life. "June 15th, I said quietly. "It was June 15th, and you chose Brandon instead." The conversation ended badly. Mom got upset, claiming I was being unfair and holding grudges. I hung up feeling exhausted and sad. Marcus found me sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. He didn't say anything, just sat beside me and held my hand. That night I made a decision. I wasn't going to cut my parents off completely, but I wasn't going to chase their approval anymore either. If they wanted a relationship with me, they'd have to put in real effort. Not surface-level texts. Not fake interest in my job. Real genuine effort. Days turned into weeks. Mom called a few more times. I let most of them go to voicemail. When I did answer, I kept conversations brief and polite. Dad tried once, asking if I wanted to grab coffee. I told him I was busy. Brandon sent an invitation to a family barbecue. I declined. I wasn't being cruel. I was just protecting myself. Marcus and I closed on a house in early spring. 3 bedrooms, beautiful kitchen, a yard where we could plant a garden. I designed every room myself, pouring love into every detail. We hosted a housewarming party, inviting friends and colleagues. I didn't invite my family. They found out through social media. Mom called immediately after seeing the photos. "You bought a house. Why didn't you tell us?" I was painting the spare bedroom, phone on speaker. "I didn't think you'd be interested." Her voice cracked. "Adrian, please. I know we've made mistakes, but we're still your family." Something in her tone stopped me. She sounded genuinely hurt. Not just inconvenienced, but actually wounded. I set down my paintbrush. "Mom, do you understand why I'm upset?" She was quiet, and I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Finally she said, "Because of the wedding." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. Because of the wedding and because of every moment before that when you chose Brandon over me. I spent my whole childhood being invisible. I'm not doing that anymore. She started crying. I'd never heard my mother cry before. I didn't realize, she sobbed. I thought you understood. Brandon needed more attention because he struggled in school. You were always fine on your own. We thought you were fine. Her words hit me like a truck. I wasn't fine, Mom. I was lonely. We talked for over an hour that night. Really talked for maybe the first time in my life. Mom admitted things I'd never expected to hear. She said she'd failed me. She said she'd been so focused on Brandon's needs that she'd forgotten I had needs too. She said missing my wedding was the biggest regret of her life. I think about it constantly, she whispered. I see those empty seats in the photos you posted, and I feel sick. I listened, tears running down my face. Part of me wanted to forgive her immediately, to let it all go and have my mom back. But another part, the part that had been hurt for so long, needed more than words. I appreciate you saying this, I told her. But I need time. She understood. Before we hung up, she asked, can we try? Can we start over? Thought about it. Starting over sounded impossible. But maybe we could start something new. Maybe, I said. Let's take it slow. That conversation opened a door, but it didn't fix everything. Trust takes time to rebuild. Over the next months, Mom made genuine efforts. She called regularly but didn't push when I was busy. She asked about my life without bringing up money. She even apologized to Marcus for how they'd treated him. Dad was harder. He didn't know how to apologize, didn't know how to admit he'd been wrong. Instead, he showed up at our house one Saturday morning with his toolbox. Heard you needed help with the fence, he said gruffly. I hadn't mentioned anything about the fence, but it did need repair. Marcus and I exchanged glances. Sure, Dad. Thanks. We worked together in silence for a while, just the sound of hammers and wood. Then, as we were finishing up, Dad said quietly, I should have walked you down the aisle. I stopped working looking at him. His face was weathered, uncomfortable. I was your father. I should have been there. It wasn't a fancy apology. There were no tears or long explanations. But for Dad it was everything. Yeah, I said softly. You should have. He nodded. We finished the fence. Before he left, he hugged me, quick and awkward. Proud of you, kiddo, he mumbled. I hugged him back, and some of the anger I'd been carrying loosened its grip. Brandon was the last holdout. He stayed distant, sending occasional texts but never really engaging. I understood why. For his whole life, he'd been the golden child. Now, suddenly, his little sister was successful, and nobody was throwing parties about his achievements anymore. One evening, Brandon showed up at my door unannounced. He looked tired, stressed. Can we talk? He asked. I let him in. We sat in my living room, the beautiful space I'd created, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, I've been a terrible brother. I didn't disagree. He continued. Growing up, I knew Mom and Dad favored me. I told myself it was because I needed the help, because you were so smart and talented that you didn't need attention. But that was a lie I told myself so I wouldn't feel guilty. His honesty surprised me. I'm sorry I never stood up for you, he said, meeting my eyes. I'm sorry I didn't come to your wedding. I should have told Mom and Dad that skipping your wedding for my party was wrong. But I liked being the center of attention too much to risk it. I felt tears building but blinked them away. Thank you for saying that, I managed. He nodded. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I see it now. I see what we did to you. We talked for hours that night. He asked about my work, my life with Marcus, my dreams. For the first time I felt like I was talking to a brother, not a competitor. Slowly, carefully, my family and I built something new. Not the relationship I'd wanted as a child, but something more honest. Mom visited our house regularly, helping me plant a garden, learning about my work. Dad came by to fix things and we'd talk while working side by side. Brandon and I had dinner once a month, just the two of us, rebuilding a sibling relationship that had never really existed. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when old patterns emerged, when Mom mentioned Brandon's achievements a little too enthusiastically, or when Dad seemed uncomfortable with my success. But they tried, and that effort meant something. 1 year after that awkward birthday dinner, my parents asked if we could celebrate my birthday together. I was turning 30. I agreed. This time they came to my house. Mom brought a homemade cake with "Happy Birthday, Adrian" written in careful frosting letters. Dad gave me a gift, a framed photo of me as a child, standing next to my watercolor painting from that 10th grade exhibition. In the photo, I was smiling despite my parents having just left. "I found this in an old album," Dad said quietly. "You deserved better." That birthday celebration was simple and small, just my family and Marcus, but it felt significant. We ate cake on my patio, watched the sunset, talked about ordinary things. At one point, Mom squeezed my hand. "Thank you for giving us another chance." I squeezed back. "Thank you for trying." Later, after everyone left, Marcus and I sat outside under the stars. "How do you feel?" he asked. Thought about it. How did I feel? I felt lighter than I had in years. The anger that had fueled me for so long was fading, replaced by something quieter. Peace maybe. Or acceptance. "I feel like I'm finally free," I said. Free from needing their approval. They're part of my life now, but they're not the center of it anymore. He kissed my forehead. "Good. You deserve that." I looked at our house, at the Porsche parked in the driveway, at the life we'd built together. I thought about the girl who'd walked down the aisle alone, broken-hearted but determined. She'd become someone stronger, someone whole. Not because my parents finally noticed me, but because I'd learned to notice myself. That was worth more than any Porsche. Today, I sit in my home office, working on designs for the next app launch. Through the window, I can see Marcus playing with our dog in the yard. My phone buzzes with a text from Mom, just checking in. Brandon's sending memes in our sibling group chat. Dad's planning to visit next weekend to help with a new project. My life isn't perfect. My family still has moments when they revert to old habits, and I still have moments when their past neglect stings. But I've learned something important. I don't need them to validate my worth. I built a successful career. I married an incredible man. I created a beautiful life. And I did it all while they weren't watching. The Porsche sits in my garage, a red reminder of the moment everything changed. Not because I bought an expensive car, but because I finally claimed my own value. When people ask me about success, I tell them it's not about the money or the car or even proving people wrong. It's about looking in the mirror and recognizing the person staring back. For years I was invisible. Now I see myself clearly. And that makes all the difference.